I don't know if frogs have visible buttholes, but he's getting one. It's a little X. Today I'm going to be doing a demo of CMYK with color blobs. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is actually just do some random water shapes. This is an exercise that I think is really fun to kind of just relax and break out of your comfort zone. When you're working, it's really easy to get caught up with thinking you need to perform or make artwork in particular that's going to do something for your social media or what have you. And so what I'm starting out with right now is I've brushed on some water and I'm kind of gonna just let the ink flow out and mix a little bit, using this kind of as a prompt to just be creative and try to make something out of it. As soon as it gets a little bit drier, then I will start drawing on top of it and make something out of it. This is already looking kind of like more of a mural of a bunch of different characters. So right here, I'm gonna do my own interpretation of what I see. The silhouette of this character here is driving what I'm doing. It's almost like I'm forced to work within this constraint and make a character with a sort of shape that I wouldn't normally think to do. For my own personal work, I think it's really important to do these sorts of exercises to break you out of your comfort zone. Sometimes, like, this is the stuff where it's like, oh, I would never have made this shape, but because I'm forcing myself to play with it here, this might, later become an inspiration for something that I actually have to do for work or design an unofficial project maybe, Recently, I've been looking at a lot of Amano's more paintings and mural work. I just love that he's so playful with a lot of his designs, and the characters don't need to look cool per se. I think a lot of times he tries to make them look really cute. And so I'm gonna try to be playful here and play with shape in the same way. This is a place where I'm gonna have a lot of freedom. I'm gonna try to do something that's a little bit more challenging perspective-wise, just as far as playing with a character. One of the questions that I've been fielding a lot today at Lightbox is whether I usually go straight to pen. Yeah, the answer is yes. I feel like for me, the reason I like to go straight to pen has a lot to do with my overall philosophy with drawing. I think when I am doing any sort of medium where I can undo, so to speak, whether it's pencil or digital, that can sometimes get me stuck in a perfectionist mentality where I'll just keep redrawing and redoing the same exact line or rechanging the pose later, and I can spend hours without having any progress to show for it. And I feel like that can be super frustrating and lead to those days where you just feel like you didn't really ever get anything done. When I force myself to do traditional with permanent media, I'm forced to keep moving and I can visually see all of the work that I've been putting in. But also the fact that it's permanent brings with it a sort of different mentality overall, where I might be way more intentional and take a lot more time with committing to the line work, and you can feel that in the work that I do. For the random blobs that are here, right, I think it's really fun to think about this as being light and shadow. So this is going to be something that's not facing the light, and then this right here is the highlight. And I think so far I'm just doing something that's kind of vaguely fairy tale kind of vibe. Doing something that's just a stream of consciousness like this, where I really don't have any plan, I haven't thought through anything. This is the time for whatever kind of research and work you've already put in. This is just like kind of breathing out, which I think is really important to do because it's kind of more in the vein of the sort of work that you do as a child when you're just drawing to have fun and to see what happens. I think exercises like this, where a lot of control is taken away as far as like the ink blobs dictating so much of what I'm drawing and the composition, that I find it really relaxing, which is great. What I'm thinking of for this character is that I want them to be in some sort of interesting hand pose. Each one of these lines that happens to be here could be an arm. Is this the elbow over here and he's holding something? Or is this the end of the hand and they're holding a sword? To me, that looks like the corner of the hand. I'm gonna go with that. A lot of times when it comes to drawing hands, I like to jump to them and I'll skip the rest of the arm there, just because landing the hand first often takes away a lot of the pressure. I can figure out how the arm has to be bent in order to make that work. And it also can lead to kind of a different aesthetic as well. A lot of times when I'm doing figure drawing, I might actually leave it completely blank on one side or never draw the connection. But because I'm seeing what's happening here, even if I leave it blank, I think it kind of implies to the audience what I was thinking. And a lot of times I don't need to draw it for the viewer to get what I was going for. edge of the handle there. And like I'm liking how this random color blob here looks like a cross contour, which is a line that's going to, across the form that like I can use that as if it's like a wrap around whatever this weapon is. This could also be part of the handle. Cool. I'm always happy when it happens to work out like that. But if it doesn't, then the great thing about it is I can start to insert other characters or details that maybe just by happenstance are overlapping what I'm drawing here. Oh, and this is a little bit wet. I'm going to take a break from here and move on to a different part of the image. What I feel like is cool is like, okay, maybe this is part of their cape. I'm going to try to play to the strengths of some of this color blob. If I were to like draw over the whole thing to the point that you don't see the color blob, then it kind of can distract from the entire point of the exercise. It feels kind of random that this thing is here. What I'd like to do is maybe turn this into like a Cerberus of sorts. Like I can vaguely see that this could be a head, right? Just as preparation for later. What I like to do now is extend this color blob thing. So additional water on here first to just vaguely allow whatever ink I throw on top of it to spread out in an uncontrolled way. This part here where it's just like bleeding out and naturally making these tributaries or whatever of color, that is just really fun. What I'm thinking is that there's going to be a head here. Since I just kind of put some color there, I will let that sit. This is a little bit of a spherical shape on top. I'm going to play into what I see there. Bit of a cyclops. So this is like more in the vein of something that's kind of scary, but I'm going to go for kind of cute as well. The thing that I took away most from Kim Jung-gi has to do with how his lines conveyed so much volume no matter what he was doing. And then also that like the way that he drew, you could tell he was always having fun with pretty much just like playing around, as opposed to some of the illustrations I do where I feel like a lot of time is spent in planning out a specific vibe or composition. I could tell that a lot of times he was just having fun, which is like, you could be so envious of because he was just playing. I'm going to try to channel that more. So I'm using Kuretake Bimoji pens. I can use watercolor on them, I can use ink on them, and they won't run. They also have a really smooth line quality to them, very consistent line weight. So there's less of that randomness that sometimes can distract from what I'm going for. I think I want to go over to here now. Do you guys see this right here, how there's this corner, and then there's this value here? Oh yeah, nice. So this is also could be like an eye socket. This could be the edge of a nose. I'll just outline what I'm thinking so you can see it as well. Drawing horses sucks. I hate drawing horses, but it's one of those things where like I really respect when someone else can draw a horse, so I'm gonna give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, hey, that's how it goes. Generally, my mentality for anything, including work, I generally work pretty fast. It's way more important to me that I'm like outputting work, and then if it doesn't, like if this was a project for a client, for example, if it doesn't work out this time, because I work so fast and I'm working with permanent media, if it doesn't work out, I'll just try again, and I feel like that feeds into part of that philosophy I was talking about earlier, where it's more about just enjoying the process. And the way that I think about it a lot of the times is that it's kind of like a dice roll. Let's say you're at the point in your art career where 1 in 10 drawings is something you're really proud of. You kind of can level up that, so like maybe it becomes 1 in 5. That gives myself permission to essentially just really have a bunch of drawings that fail at doing what I want them to do at least. But I don't feel as intense a pressure as I used to that every drawing is so important. Because I know that like if it doesn't work out this time, maybe I just need to try a few more times and it'll eventually work out. I trust that the dice roll will eventually land in my favor, even if it is annoyingly low rate in the beginning. Everybody has bad days, man. I'll have the day where I rolled on a drawing like 5 or 6 times and none of them worked out. It's just like that I lose all of my drawing powers. Maybe I just really can't draw this one thing and it feels like, oh, it's just too hard. I just can't do it at all. But the funny thing is, after those awful days that feel like you've wasted the entire day just struggle bussing, it's so freaking annoying that it's usually the next day, if you try again, that it's like suddenly super easy. And then you're just like, why did I suffer so much? Why didn't I just like take a break, go and walk around? And I know everyone's going to tell you like, oh yeah, be healthy and do all these things. But honestly, like I know the frustration also of like being like, I'm not leaving until I get this done. I only have today or whatever to draw. So I just want to make the output. But I think knowing that like even if it looks like I do things effortlessly or that because I go straight to pen that means I've mastered anything, that's not really true. It's more so that like I'm someone who's willing to try enough time to get those dice rolls that I'm talking about, you know. He's got asymmetrical horns because of this color blob. But you know, sometimes that's me. Wherever I put the human, there will be another point of interest, right? So generally putting them in a more central place, like I feel like it would be random if the human is just over here, even though this is prime real estate for a character. What I'm thinking of is maybe using the negative space of this color blob, just because it's closer to the center. Oftentimes it's like coloring on top of the color blob to draw the shape, but like thinking about the silhouette of this edge here, like what is that? Maybe that could be armor. I'm gonna roll with that because I'm on camera. So essentially this is an outline of some piece of armor. A lot of times when I'm drawing and I'm not exactly sure what's gonna happen, I think it's best to draw the thing that feels safe. So this is like vaguely like a shoulder pad, and that means the head will be around here, somewhat of the knight's face mask part. And because this person had really curly hair, I'm just gonna go for something that's slightly more straight. I think also one of the random tips that's really fun is that if you're someone who's not really great with drawing characters or feel like you put too much importance on the way the character looks when you get into the drawing, I find if I'm feeling that pressure, which maybe I'm feeling a little bit right now, I might just leave a lot of those details for later. So by that I mean like the pupils and the mouth, which I think are generally going to be the more expressive elements on a character. I might just leave those until later, until I'm feeling it, you know? And I think that's totally fine. You might notice based off of what I'm drawing that it's kind of in a similar vein to a piece that I just finished that's like a Monster Hunter inspired work. And, you know, I was like basically doing a bunch of research for that as far as like looking up references of characters. That's why I'm channeling it so much. Now thinking about what are these? Because I drew another character, maybe they could be part of their weapon. Speaking of which, then I might just jump back over here to finish off this weapon. I will use this line and it will just be like a weird sword. But maybe the fact that it's so weird might inform how I design a real weapon for a different project later. I'm mimicking this curvature on the edge of the blade. So it's like, oh, I have to kind of like make this look intentional as opposed to just slapped onto what I was doing. Sometimes that means I might go back over here and just try to evoke that same shape just to have the rhythm match each other. How do I pre-visualize or improvise when I do my own work? I definitely do both approaches for different types or just depending on what I'm going for. But I think the thing that's consistent always is I have usually a clear idea of what the emotion is that I want the audience to have when they look at the final artwork. And I kind of try to let that guide it as much as possible. If the piece is about an atmosphere as opposed to, you know, a singular character, then everything that I'm adding, I'm making sure that it serves that main idea so that it's kind of cohesive both content-wise as well as steering the viewer's eye towards what I think is most important. I have a very clear idea of how to do that as far as like the main character is going to be like in the center of a one-point perspective. And so all the lines are converging towards them. And it's very easy then to know exactly what character, like essentially behind the vanishing point. But then other times like this one where it's more improvised, it's actually more of an exercise in balancing composition. Like I don't want your eye to get stuck in a particular spot. So that sense of flow in the composition is a lot of times the main thing I'm thinking about, aside from whether the things I'm adding serve the overall main idea that I'm trying to convey. It's pretty intense over here. White eyes are often really scary. So maybe I'll just go in there and add pupils. It's still really intense, but more alive than kind of like godly, I guess. So here's one of those balance things where these are two humans now, and so they feel like the center of the piece, but like I feel like a trio of sorts might make more sense for the composition. So something important needs to happen over here. I know I made this the cape earlier. This is one of those situations where permanent media can feel like there's mistakes. Like, oh, I wish this was empty so I could, add something there. But one of the most important things is the ability to adapt and to hide mistakes, essentially. So I'm gonna reuse this shape to do something else. A large part of hiding that will have to do with reusing this smooth flow and motif throughout whatever character design is. So maybe that means something that's more flowy. So what I was thinking of then is just like something more cloth and fabric should be like a large element of this design. I don't know yet what this is, but it's like vaguely around where the neck would be, right? So I'm just gonna kind of mirror that shape on this side. For fun, I'm feeling like curly hair. I don't know if that really makes any sense with this sort of outfit, but I'm just gonna go for it. Oh, and one thing that I haven't really touched on yet is using more of these kind of darker values, like the shading that I'm getting into right now, to start to hint at the lighting scheme, but also as a way to pull the eye. So basically, anytime there's an area of the image that's going to be darker, you're going to draw the viewer's eye towards that location. Using that to control composition is a great tool, but also in the context of doodles, where you're thinking about more so like not needing a long-term like cleanliness to it, as far as like maybe coloring it digitally later and not wanting to be committed to a particular lighting scheme yet. But here it can be used to essentially hide mistakes, which I'm sure a lot of people are used to doing. But a big part of what will make it work better is if you use that as a consistent style. So rather than like only here being dark and therefore being super kind of out of place, that might mean that I decide to keep that aesthetic going. I might go back into other places to balance out composition, but also add a little bit of light information. What I'm visually thinking is like how I can fill in any gaps, like the edge of this horse's face, which is so terrifying to ever do anything with the horse, but also to balance out the weight on the image and where your eye's drawn to. I really like some of the spread here, so I definitely want to choose to do some shapes and lines that highlight those things rather than hide them. Using these shapes here to evoke the hair of the horse, like the mane, to convey the form without obscuring those colors. One way to make this look intentional is to do things that slightly obscure the line work from before. For example, if I do some overlap work here with the hand being on top of the cape, then this shape overall starts to look more like something that's been planned out. So I think this is pretty serendipitous that like the edge of this color blob could be like the elbow. So I will play into that. Over here, I left this character alone for a while, right? And maybe this is part of your process where you've been stewing on it and you've been thinking about like, oh, who's that character? You just left them alone for long enough to really meditate on it and think, oh, they really need to be kind looking or they really need to be undead or scary. You know, just leaving it alone until you're ready, I think is also totally fine. You probably have noticed already from just the way that I'm working that I don't have any problem just jumping around. Like I don't think I need to finish a character all the way through before I move on to something else. There's several reasons why you might want to do that just in general, actually. If you're planning out a drawing and there's like overlap of like a character or some props or whatever that's going to be in front of it, then sometimes you have no choice but to kind of just like do as much as is safe behind that part of the character, and then you have to wait until you draw the part in front of it to come back. So it's totally fine to leave things alone. Stew on them if you need time to think about what you actually wanted to do in that space.
Bryce Kho is a professional illustrator and concept artist, and he has a lot of wisdom to share about digital painting. And I'm really excited to say that he's joining the Digital Painting Fundamentals course as one of the teachers to walk you through his techniques and how he makes digital pieces in his style. This course also covers all the basic knowledge you need to start working digitally and advanced knowledge for when you need to push your art to the next level. So go check it out at proko.com/digital painting.
So how to make something cute? It's usually got big eyes, but maybe not with like sharp pupils. Some ripe territory right here. Usually the stupider it looks also helps a lot.
How often do these automatic drawings inspire a planned out piece for later?
Well, to be honest, I don't have as much time to do these as I would like. And so when I do them, they're really a treat. And I feel like that's something that I want to encourage anyone who does have time to do. But as far as your question is like them inspiring something bigger, it's happened a few times at least. So what I'm thinking about is the very first time that I had free time to draw in like many years, because I was working as a game developer from like 2014 to 2018, essentially on crunch that entire time, that I finally was like, hey, what should I draw for fun, when I was asking my wife. And she said, draw me a bunch of Psyducks. And so I actually, right then and there, I drew a bunch of Psyducks that were just really stupid, kind of as if they were just shopping. And those doodles that like she thought were hilarious, I was like, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep drawing a bunch of Psyducks. And then I expanded on the idea that they were shopping at the Tsukiji Fish Market in Tokyo. That turned into a piece that is like one of the ones I'm most known for, actually, you know? So having fun, doing something that's super silly, sometimes that's what people feel, you know? That's somehow because it's so spontaneous that it's really honest. And that honesty is usually also something that can resonate more easily than something that's super broody and you've thought about too much and maybe it's overworked as far as the idea stage goes. So here's a dumb cat. That's probably my wife's favorite character. Oh, she likes frogs. So let's do a frog. Looking for a spot. I'm just scanning through this area here. I think, oh, okay. So see how this line here could be a silhouette? There you go. See, that's the best part of the drawing. What am I doing with all this other stuff? I should just draw this 100 times, right? And I think the sillier it looks, the better. So he's getting little baby arms. Continue to stick on prompt here and use at least part of this color blob for this arm. But yeah, that's the first time that one of the people here working at Proko laughed. So I think I'm on the right track. Why didn't I just draw a bunch of dumb frogs? Yeah. But you see this? This is a happy accident of sorts, where this color blob can look like it's the edge of the plane. So this is like the front part that's lit, and then this is like the underside of that frog, where its butt would be. I don't know if frogs have visible buttholes, but he's getting one. It's a little X. He's not fully grown, so he's got a little bit of a tail. Similarly, this can be like that cross contour, dividing the front-facing plane and the plane that's facing the bottom. Here's our main character now, so he gets a crown. This is the frog anime. Someday, this will be the show I'm known for. It looks like it's an intense fantasy drama, but the main character is a frog. He just serendipitously causes the end of an empire, and they start to worship the frog, and they start a whole frog religion. What kind of friend does Frog King have? A duck? All right, let's do a duck. Here, like this curve looks like a wing, so I would just immediately go in for that part. I don't want it to be a Psyduck because I've already talked about Psyduck, so he's gonna have a different kind of hairstyle. It's a dragon duck. That's what I've been planning all along, actually. Is dragon duck nice, cool, or evil? What kind of duck is it? It's an evil duck? Wow, that's rude. It's sneaky. A lot of value happened to happen here, right? So I think we're gonna actually play into that and maybe make that like tattoos or scars. I think it's a scar. And what makes dragon duck evil? He's the usurper, so he wants the power for himself. Okay, so see how this happens to be a nice beak, but then there's just this little bit of extra heading out there. We got to do something with that. So I think he's eating something, and I think what happens to work out best is a fish. But I really like this. Like this is like, that's really cool, right? Because it's exactly the tail, and then a little bit of those end fins. I don't know if they have a real name, but end fins is what we're going with. Okay. All right. So this fish was really important in the story. That's why it's featured in this key art for this show. The fish belonged to who? Who did the fish belong to?
Clearly friends of the frog.
Oh, this was Frog's friend? Holy cow. This is dark. Is this the grandma fish? Okay, we're cooking now. I'm seeing this as an opening for where the face could be. So I see this as the top contour and this as the tail. That's where the face goes, right? Is this fish friend a lady or a dude?
I think it's a guy.
It's a guy?
It's a space for a mustache in there.
Oh, you're right. That's a perfect mustache. So this is the husband of Grandma Fish, and Evil Duck has tricked Grandma in such a way where he waits until no one else is watching and he usurps the power from her. I really like it when old people have so many wrinkles that you can't see their eyes. This is a very kindly man who did not deserve to have his fish wife eaten by a duck who we thought was our friend. Are you kidding me? The writers on this show are ruthless. All right. That beard is perfect. Thank you for the tip, Proko. That's where you get all the tips, Proko. So this is exactly what we're talking about earlier. Like, okay, when might you use any of this automatic drawing for something? It's not necessarily an illustration. It doesn't always have to be like it was with the Psyduck thing I mentioned. It might just be a character design. So an old man who is a fish, who's got an afro, not afro, what's it called? Like a mohawk? I might use that someday. All right. King Frog, Evil Duck. I'm guessing these are just Evil Duck's squad, and therefore we may need to adjust their designs to be more duck-like because they serve the usurper. With this hat here, I'm going to put in, they're not angel wings, they're duck wings. I mean, maybe they don't look like duck wings, but when they animate this on Netflix, they will look like duck wings. Okay, and duck needs a right-hand bodyguard or assassin. What's an animal that's friends with duck? Anybody? Squid? All right, squid. Squid is easy because I see that shape right here as a squid. It's like slightly more of an octopus. Yeah, I'm going with octopus because that's what I remember how to draw. Sorry, guys. Duxon's got scars. That will be the recurring theme. They were in a battle together. That's how this octopus guy first became allies. They go way back. That's the thing that connects them, is that look there. I might just extend the scary cat, who you think is going to be a bad guy at first because he's so crazy, but he's actually the mount for the frog. But because there's no more color block here, he's got to be one-armed. So that is the edge of where it got sliced off by octopus. Yeah. How did he cut it off? He's like so soft, right? He has to have a giant weapon. Okay, cool. Pretty happy with that. I will start doing a passive magenta that more so highlights some of the character work that I've done. What I'm thinking about right now is just balancing the composition with color. I'm not really worried about the actual hue that the color lands on at the moment. One of the fun things about working with a CMYK scheme, like I'm doing here with the cyan, magenta, and yellow, is that no matter what I do, it's going to generally be and feel cohesive just because I'm mixing three colors, and any combination of those three colors, the things that clash the most are actually when you're just kind of essentially pulling in a color that has no connection to anything else, and you kind of have too many different colors that could be highlights, and so they're kind of battling against each other. Not really a problem here. So with this pass, what I'm doing also is focusing mostly on where to put light and shadow. That's connected to what I said about the composition, just because I want the light and shadow to balance out the image. You can see here where there's already blue that like the combination of this magenta pink color will turn it purple, and that's cool. I think the color that I decided to start with should be the dominant color. So because there was already a lot of magenta on the page, just from the randomness of when I made the blobs, going with more magenta made sense as a starting point, but also that means that this piece is going to be leaning into that color scheme as well. And then using value to push out and make parts of the drawing more visible. So essentially by making the area dark around this character, I can make their silhouette more readable. And then if I like want to hide a character that I don't particularly care for, then I might just like not give them that breathing space. Then that pushes them into the background. Although I'm mostly thinking about how value is affecting the overall image, the one thing that like is kind of like something in my back pocket that I'm also low-key planning around, but is kind of a source of some worry, is any place that I don't want to have magenta. So for example, if I wanted the purest green somewhere, then because magenta is not anywhere part of that recipe of the color wheel, then I would just have to not touch it at this stage. The thing that I think is really fun though about generally going pretty loose with this first passive color is that the end result of combining all three colors is going to result in a gray. And so it's kind of okay to be fast and loose with the dominant color, because if anything, just combining all three in equal enough amounts will kind of neutralize it and allow the image to not be distracted or pull too much attention to it.
Sorry, it's just a materials question. Is it like, what paper is it they're using and what paints are you using?
Sure. Rohrer and Klinger are the brand. The ink that I'm using for the brush pen, these are Kuretake Bimoji pens. The type of brush on this one is the medium tip. I use those quite a lot. And then the paper is probably just like cheap printer paper. That part is not super important, especially when I'm doing something like this that's like just for fun. The duck beak, it's not as big of a transformation as if I were to put a lot of yellow on magenta, but it is still really cool to see that like what was previously pink is now an orange. Maybe similarly, I should do that to somewhere over here for the sake of balance. So I was originally thinking that like this guy has a big bright yellow eyeball, going more for the places that I think are safe. And I think that's a totally fine thing to do in the beginning too, is like do everything that you're really confident of sooner, because those are basically just like with other things in my work, like kind of a marker that like will help guide the rest of the work as well. So I really like how this orange is coming out. And that's one of the most fun things about doing this kind of CMYK approach is there's a sense of discovery along with the entire process that is like, oh, it's coming together, and sometimes unexpected things happen, like this grayish green that happened here. It's just fun. I don't know if there's anything else to it other than that, like it makes the drawing process interesting. And then sometimes, let's say I want this to be red, like at the end, just a little bit of kind of like a highlight at the edge of where it goes from pink to white can really make that interesting and dynamic, as opposed to kind of the out of the tube sort of look of a pure color. So right now, doing this guy, old man's face, is making me realize like, oh yeah, skin tone being the yellow plus magenta is pretty safe. Overdoing this color could be dangerous as far as like, you don't want their skin to be super yellow. So think of the color more as a highlight, especially in the shadow places. Yellow's the sneakiest color in this method for sure, just because you can't see it as well. And so when you're putting it on there, sometimes it feels like you haven't put that much, but when it blends with other colors, it can still be very intense. I overheard one question was like, what is the medium? And these are colored inks, not watercolor. The big difference between using watercolor and colored inks is that watercolor, you can pool. Like if you make a mistake, you can put a little bit more water on it, and then you can actually lift it off the page. But with ink, that's basically impossible. As soon as it touches the page, and what it looks like is what it will look like. So it's far less forgiving, but it's so much more saturated and easy to get really deep colors without really having to go in on pulling in a bunch of watercolor, which sometimes takes multiple layers. So it's a lot of fun. Okay, cool. So I did a sufficient amount of yellow. I am going to try to do a little bit of blue just to get into it. This is not a fully balanced out piece, but you know, it gives you a rough idea of like how fun it is to like get some of these other colors. I will start with somewhere safe, like a place I don't really care about here, to test out how much blue is on my brush. Right here, I feel like the most important part is making sure I make things readable by leaving certain things out of this deep value. So like not coloring in the hand there, I think is what's going to help the readability of the piece overall. I don't want green there. Maybe orange is better, so I'll just leave that alone. Some of this armor here I think was cool in blue, so I'm going to lean into that for sure. Like I was saying, any place that's going to get all three colors will start to turn into this more gray neutral color. The slightest imbalance will mean that it's leaning towards a certain color in particular. So at the moment, that looks like it's slightly still magenta. If I want it to lean towards blue, then I would just keep slapping on blue. So there's a little bit of wiggle room as you paint in this method to like balance things out. This guy who's super yellow, as I add blue, will turn into green. I'm sure you noticed that this is turning into a little bit of a rainbow because I'm being so fast and loose. But the rainbow itself isn't, and at least in my opinion, not super distracting of a range of color. And that's virtue of the fact that it's just mixing the same three base colors. Okay, so this is where I said I wanted it to be green. However, because these values are so light, I can't go in too dark with a blue, or otherwise it'll be really intense. What I often do then is I go to a place that I think doesn't matter or is kind of safe, and I'll just paint over there until the amount of value on the brush is what I'm looking for. That's kind of just like a safe check to make sure that when I get to an area that's really important, I'll have the correct value to add. So now as it's winding down what's on here, I feel like it's safer to do some of these. I'm gonna start with this one. So now it's gonna be the same tone as this part over here. And when I go slowly, or more slowly than in this kind of demo, that's something I'm like conscious of all the time, just because if you want it to look very specific, then you gotta put on a very specific amount of value. And then a lot of the color that I'm like just slapping on here without thinking about, it has less to do with what I think the hue of the character should be and more to do with like what I think the value of the piece needs. So I used to, when I would paint digitally and things like that, paint everything in the on model character, so to speak, like making sure that like, oh, if the duck is yellow, then I'm gonna paint him yellow. But as I've kind of gotten further along in my own color theory, I find that like that doesn't matter nearly as much as I used to think. And it's more so just like making the overall readability work and whatever you think is important come to the fro. So I think that means you can kind of be a little bit looser and a little bit more creative with what you think colors should be. The other thing that will happen that's on the fly is like, just because there's so much blue that I've been adding in this pass, he actually shines the most by being the slightly more golden color. This is one of those things that happens because it's improvisational and I don't need him to be a specific color. I might be like, oh, it actually works best if he isn't generic green, and just let the composition sometimes inform what's going on with my color choices. I'm scared of horses, guys. Horses are mean to artists. You know, real story, I'm deathly allergic to horses. One time my parents took me to a Cirque du Soleil. I think it was in San Francisco, where they have a show that's entirely about horses. And as soon as the opening curtain opened, this wave of horsehair came rushing at the audience. They actually had to call a paramedic because horses are my kryptonite. So if anyone is gonna try to attack me, that's a pretty good way. But also they're awful to draw. Do not recommend. Cool. So this often happens in this kind of drawing where like it started out super magenta leaning, but now magenta is the color that I'm missing most. Things like this bottom area feel like too heavy blue, maybe because the sword needed to be blue. So pushing this part towards more of a gray by adding magenta, I think is a pretty safe bet for the next move I want to take. Right now, adding that value really mostly to separate that horse face from the sword. I want his mask to look more finished, and so I'm basically gonna just add value to pull that in. A little bit of a highlight there. So for this, because this started as like a random ink blots that I was just trying to do an automatic kind of completion for, there was very little planning other than like generally the composition being balanced. But as far as my own personal work, if you look at those things, I definitely do plan it out quite a bit in my head. It's much more like blocking out the space than it is like specifics. The only thing that'll be really specific is the central focus of the piece. So that will take up generally a center or a third of the page somewhere, right? But then after that, everything else that I'm adding, it's mostly improvised, but with the clear direction that it needs to support that main focus somehow. So that can be narratively with like the story, like adding to the story, you know? So if it's a cafe, then it's like, oh, maybe there should be like a bunch of coffees in this corner, or maybe there should be like a guy on his laptop, but it simultaneously needs to accomplish that as well as to lead your eye towards the points of focus that you actually want the viewer to look at. This final minute where I need to fix everything in one stroke is this addition of yellow. And that needs to be probably here. It also is adding the correct amount of yellow balance, where there's a lot of yellow up here, but not much down here. How I determined whether I needed more yellow is just like where my eye's being drawn to, because this is bright. And so I want my eye to be drawn more down here. So adding a little bit of that highlight of yellow is one way to accomplish that, because it's bright and has contrast. Same over here. Generally speaking, this has got yellow right here, but not here. So it's kind of popping out to me. But also adding a cute blush on his cheeks. And then separating this color from up here. And is that good? Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
If you want more Bryce, he's got a book showcasing his art for Sea of Stars. It's available for pre-order. Link is in the description. And again, don't miss his upcoming section in the Digital Painting Fundamentals course at proko.com/digitalpainting.